Hello, I'm Frank Conkling with Panda Consulting, and this is the Panda Consulting ArcGIS workshop. Today, we're going back and we're going to look again at ArcMap versus ArcGIS Pro. The reason why I'm doing this is that we've actually had a couple of our clients who were asking us, well, why should they move from ArcMap into ArcGIS Pro? And we're going to explore that today. Before we do that, what I want to do is I want to go through and look at a couple things, including refreshing everybody's memory about Panda Consulting. We actually, if you go out to the Panda Consulting, we're celebrating our 23rd year. We specialize in land records and everything having to do with land records. If you're looking for a list of what's coming up, we actually, on our events page, we actually have a list and a calendar view of everything that's coming up, where we're going to be and such. If you're looking for a linear view, if you go to the workshop page, you actually see it there. And in addition to that, you're also going to see our past workshops and get links so that you can actually watch these past workshops and see what they were about. If you don't like doing it that way, we actually have our own YouTube page. And if you go to our Panda Consulting YouTube page, there's a link there and it will bring you up to and open up our YouTube page. We currently have over 60 different workshop recordings on there, probably about close to 70, maybe 75 hours worth of recording. And these are all freely available for you. Really nice recordings, and they are the recordings of the workshops. Hopefully we've covered most of the topics that you're looking for. If not, let us know and we'll cover it for you. Everything from ArcGIS Pro to the fabric, ArcGIS Parcel Fabric, to enterprise readies, to using tasks and story maps. We've got a couple of discussions that I and Nancy von Meyer had regarding land records and parcel mapping, both current and past and in the future. How do you set up ArcGIS Pro and such? So there's quite a bit of knowledge there waiting for you. So hopefully you'll take advantage of that. So today, what I want to do is I want to talk about ArcMap versus ArcGIS Pro, and what's happening with that, and why should you start considering, and what are some of the things that you want to look for when you're making this transition? Because there are some differences, there's some similarities on there. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the interface. What does this really look like on the interface? By the way, before we get to that, I do want to cover one more thing here, and that is, why are we doing this? And it turns out that ArcMap is no longer being developed. It's the current release. It's going to continue like that. But in fact, it will be only supported until March 1st of 2026. So you have less than 5 years left on it in order to go and get any support on it. Doesn't mean you can't use it after that, but it just means that Esri is not going to support it anymore. But also be aware that there's no real development going on. So there's no improvements going on. It is basically just fixing bugs if they are major bugs. If they're minor bugs, they may not be fixed. So for that reason alone, for planning, both short-term and long-term planning, you may want to consider transitioning into ArcGIS Pro. So let's look at that interface on here. And this is ArcMap. This is our old trusty ArcMap. Interestingly, ArcMap has been out for over 20 years. And like all technology that's been out there for that long, it's been patched and repatched and patched again, and things have been sort of pasted onto it, and using an analog metaphor, things have been duct taped to it, and you use baling wire to fix it. It really was in need of an overhaul. And I, for one, I'm glad that Esri has done this and taken a new look at it. Because if we look at the ArcGIS Pro interface, this is really the next generation of GIS software. especially GIS desktop software, and what we're going to do with it and how we can look at it, all of that. And it has so much more functionality now. So let's just look at the interface itself. As you know, has been evident, if you've used ArcMap before, you wind up with these toolbars. These toolbars, you have a series of toolbars, and these toolbars contain things like this right here is the Kogo toolbar, and it contains all those tools that you need for Kogo. And these are standard toolbars on here, and what you need for those. The problem is, because this is so old, and because this has been out for so long, and the development has been piecemeal as you're going along, you wind up with things such as, if I start editing, I'll go over here and go to start editing on any of these. That's all right. If I go to editing here, let's go and move this over here so we can see it. And this is a place where it becomes obvious what's going on here. We have, for example, a rotate tool here, all right? But there's other things. There's a divide tool here, but there's also over here, there's move tools and there's merge tools, and they really aren't consistent in where these tools are. If you've been using ArcMap for 20 years or so, and you're used to it, you kind of remember through muscle memory where all of these tools are and what they do. But it really was in need of an overhaul. The tools they had were all right, but there was always issues with it. The interface has a basic table of contents on here. Besides these tools, there's a basic table of contents, which has the ability to go in and display things by draw order, or the source as far as where the sources are, the visibility as far as whether they're turned on or not, whether or not they're selectable. And then there's other options in here for the table of contents. And if we quickly switch over to ArcGIS Pro, we can see that they've carried this same metaphor over there, in which we have table of contents, list by display order, list by data source. But then we have the selection. This is list by selection. It will show us what is selectable. In ArcMap, that's actually under a separate component here. Let me see if I can get snapping and options. And you can tell it what is selectable and what is not selectable under that. Selection options. Here it is, I think. Nope. And you can see this sort of the frustration you get into. Where are these things? It's not a logical design for them, because they came one after one another. And as someone thought about the use, they would do it. Same way with editing. In ArcGIS Pro, you now have the ability to go and enable editing and tell it what you want to edit, so that when you start editing, you can immediately control that you're not editing everything in your table of contents, but rather you can be selective in what you can edit, what you can select. Same way with this new snapping button, where it allows you to go and define what you will be snapping to on here. And then finally, there's a labeling manager, or a list by labeling, and this takes over for the old labeling manager. And I'm trying to figure out where that is on here. But anyway, there used to be a label manager up here. Maybe I need to go and turn that on. I need to turn that on. This was the label manager here, and it would let you go and do that. So again, the interfaces, if you've been using ArcMap for a while, you kind of, through your muscle memory, just explored and figured out what they are, but there wasn't a lot of sense to it. There wasn't a lot of organization put into the original designs. They just sort of evolved as they were going through on here. Within ArcGIS Pro, they basically stepped back, they being ESRI, they stepped back and evaluated. Matter of fact, I remember being out at the San Diego user conference, and ESRI, and this was a good 5-6 years ago, ESRI was holding what they called UX, user experience labs, in which they would have many of the attendees go through and say, if you're trying to do something, how would you do it? What would you think would be the best way for you to go after this? And where would you like all of these options to be? And they did a lot of testing, a lot of experimentation on it to see what the user expected as far as an interface. So that's the standard interface here. You'll see a lot of similarities. For example, in ArcMap, you had this concept called docking planes. This was a pane or dialog box that was used you could move it around and customize it and dock it and put it wherever you want it, so that this was the dialog area for creating features, and the tools that you would have available to you would be listed down here. I could move these and dock them over here. In ArcGIS Pro, I have the same thing. This is a create pane. Now it's being called. And once I start editing, I'll start seeing some of these things here. Let's turn on some of the editing, some of the display on here. All right. And it will allow me to go and then go and edit this as I'm moving forward. It's telling me it's locked by another running application. Oh, because I've loaded it into ArcMap. I am working out of a parcel fabric or a single file geodatabase, and it won't let me do that. So only the anno can be edited. But it's the same function. It lists all the tools that are available in here, and I can move this interface around and customize it for what I want to do. Again, there's enough similarities between the two that you can sort of muddle around the first time you do it. The biggest difference is the ribbon up here and what you've got in that ribbon and how you interact with it. This follows the same standard sort of defaults as Microsoft Office ribbon does. And it's become pretty much a standard on Windows types of applications as far as what it's got on there. So again, rather than toolbars, which you're trying to figure out what this thing does and what that toolbar does, all right, you will have these ribbons. And a ribbon, for example, you've got one ribbon which controls a series of settings for you. You have a map ribbon, and the ribbon is broken up, a map tab, and that map tab is broken into groups. And this is the clipboard grouping on this tab. This is the navigate grouping, and this replaces what was called the standard toolbar here in ArcMap, so that you would have zoom in, zoom out, pan, full, extend, previous, next, measurements, the same sorts of things. You now go and do that here inside of this tab group on the map tab. What ArcGIS Pro does do better is that the integration of various structures, for example, base maps, where you can by default tell it that you want to use a base map that's built into ESRI products and look at all the world base maps there and automatically go and do that. You could do that in ArcMap by going to File, add a data, add a base map. And if you were logged in, you could do the same thing. It was sort of hidden for you, though. It was tougher to go and find. And again, this is automatically added to you. There is some differences regarding things like selecting, and we'll go over these as we go along. Some of the other tabs we have inserts if we want to go and insert a new map document. And this is where one of the big differences is that in ArcGIS Pro, the project file contains not just a single map document, not just a single layout document, but it can contain multiple layout documents in there. Matter of fact, I'm going to go and show you how when I go to my catalog, I can go to my folder, which is here, and I can see that this is the actual ArcMap map document, an MXD. I can tell it to go ahead and import that map document, and it will go and convert it and import it in, and I can actually view the map document, and it will look exactly the same as what it does inside of ArcMap, all right, it will use the same symbology and the same order over here. Everything is the same. So I can actually start my migration by just going and opening up a project file and then pulling in and telling it to import and open up my existing map documents on there. I'm going to remove that. But again, the project file inside of ArcGIS Pro can have multiple maps. It can have multiple layouts. It can have multiple components in here as part of it, and it stores them all as a single integrated one. One of the interesting things is, again, I'm gonna go back here to my map documents, and I think this is the one here. I'm going to open this again. I can actually, if I have multiple documents open, I can actually go to the View tab and tell it, if I've got multiple documents open, to go ahead and link them together so that when I move one document, one map document, it also will go and move the corresponding layers in the other map document. So I can link my views together, center them, and scale them to the same thing. So if I have multiple views here, it allows me to very quickly go and change between them and symbolize it. I really like that inside of ArcGIS Pro. That's the View tab. And again, there's things such as converting between 2 and 3Ds, linking views, resetting the panes, opening up a new catalog pane or a new catalog view. And I've had several clients ask me about this. What's the difference between a catalog pane and a catalog view? Well, it turns out that this thing over here that is docked right here, that's actually called a catalog pane, right? It's a shorter version, and it's similar to what you see over here. Right? It has the same sort of functionality as what you see in ArcMap. But as you're aware, ArcMap actually had another application called ArcCatalog. There was a whole different catalog. It had much more functionality in there. When you go to ArcGIS Pro, you actually can create what's called a catalog view, and that will open up in the main display area, and it will have all that additional functionality as the old ArcMap used to have. Matter of fact, in some ways, it's gotten even better functionality in that. Let's go here and look at this. I can see I have a shapefile here. In our catalog, for me to switch, I'd have to go and switch between the views at the bottom if I wanted to go between the description or the metadata and the geometry or the geography and the tables. In the catalog view, I can flip here, automatically see the geometry here, and I can flip to the table and automatically have it list the table up for me. Again, I think a much more well thought out interface for us than what we used to have before. We would have to switch the applications on here. Catalog view, many people don't use this. I actually find this invaluable. I use this very often when I'm working and manipulating larger data sets. All right, so let's go back here and let's keep going across. The analysis tool, the analysis tab brings me up to things such as Model Builder and Python and some of the environments. You now have a history, which used to be the results tab. The history will actually bring up a separate pane and tell you what you've been doing for all your geoprocessing. And one of the interesting things here is in ArcGIS Pro, you now have the ability to schedule tools so that they automatically will run at certain times. So if you have, for example, a model that might do an ETL, you can actually schedule that to run at certain times, and it will use the ArcGIS Pro and the Windows scheduler to go and run that. Again, much better, much more thought out on here. The tools, this is the geoprocessing pane, and this gives you access to all of your toolbars, same thing as our catalog used to do. All the toolbars, what you have in here, and allows you to go and run them. You also have the ability, let's go and get rid of the history here, close that out. With the geoprocessing, you have the ability to go and create favorites of things that you use often, and you can create and add your own favorites. You also have the ability to go and look at ready-to-use tools against your portals, against feature services. We haven't talked about that much, but the feature service is one of the nice things built into ArcGIS Pro is that you have access to not just file geodatabases, not just shape files, not just file-based geodata sets, not just client-server-based geodata sets, not just shape files, but also you can go out to ArcGIS Online. You go to on-premise portals. So I could actually click on here and it will show me all my ArcGIS Online components on here. I can look here and it will show me a map that I have defined. I could actually go and open up this map inside of I've actually got that doing the same. This is a map of Florida. The rest of this was not. So it will go and bring in these map documents, these maps that are stored over on ArcGIS Online or on premises. Same way with the data, I can go and do that. So one of the nice things of ArcGIS Pro is that it actually does work with virtually all of the types of data that we're using now. Shape files works seamlessly with shape files. Files, your databases works seamlessly with those. One thing it does not do inside of ArcGIS Pro is it does not work with personal geodatabases because it requires a separate 64-bit driver that is not included inside of ArcGIS Pro at all. And it's still synchronizing these between them. So again, you have your sort of local elements here. You've got your portal, you've got favorites if you have specific favorites in here. Turns out this is some connection information over to servers for some of my clients. I can connect up to those across the internet to go and access the data and maintain it that way. All right. By the way, it keeps track of all the maps that you open, and I can go and delete these maps out, say I really don't want them as part of this, and do that. So that's my maps. I have my toolboxes. Every project has its own toolbox, and you want to be aware of that when you're creating it. Has databases that are part of this. Every project has a default geodatabase. It can be created by default and it's stored on your local computer, or you can redefine it. In this case, this AGP_seminar is where this data is stored in. So I could go and say, make that my default geodatabase, and all interim results that I do will go into there. All default, when it's looking for something, will look in there for it instead of the default geodatabase. Let me go and remove that one. All right. If I have multiple layouts, I can see, and a layout is a map document that's used for printing. I actually have a couple in here. I can predefine favorites as far as my styles. And then I have the folders in which I'm working. Similar to ArcMap, inside of this Arc catalog component, you'd have to connect to a folder, and it would then allow you to go and say, okay, here's a folder that I want to go and work in. Go and do this one. And you then have access to it. With ArcGIS Pro, it's the same thing. You go and you add a folder connection, tell it where it is, and you then have that ability to go and access information that's stored in that folder. Some of the things you'll see is that with these folder connections, they are much faster in Pro than they used to be in ArcMap, because in ArcMap, it literally had to go and read that folder to figure out what was going to be displayed in it when it went to go and do that. So real simply, we went through some of the here's the view editing. It allows you to start editing by default inside of ArcMap, inside of ArcGIS Pro. You are automatically editing. However, this is an option in later versions that I tend to put on all of my project files so I can know whether I'm automatically making changes to data or not changing. You can actually tell it to go and use the start and stop editing like we used to have in ArcMap. And I'll show you how to set that up here soon. So here's the edit, whether or not it's got topology on it, save edits, discard edits, copy, paste, those sorts of things. Creating features is coming from here. Selecting, all the different selector tools are here. The attribute pane is here. We've got nothing selected. Let's go ahead and select something on here. And here's the attribute pane. All right, and then imagery, it's got its own separate tab. If you've got some imagery inside of your project, I do really like the geoprocessing functions in here. It's much better than it used to be in ArcMap. Sharing, when in fact you are sharing something and giving it to someone else. Sharing means everything from capturing it to a clipboard, exporting the map to a file, printing the map, sending that out, taking a map file that you can send to someone else and they can pull it up and get all their data and everything else in there. You can actually share it to a web layer, publish it out to ArcGIS Online or publish it out to an on-premises portal. You can also overwrite layers on here. So right out of the box, nothing special needed. You can go and send data up to a hosted service and overwrite them. Again, this is the share area here. Appearance, if you have selected a layer, a feature layer over here, all right, you automatically, let's get off of here so that the appearance tab will not show up unless I actually am on and has selected a layer itself. And then I get 3 different options here. I can, well, what do you want to do about the appearance? Do I want to set the display scales for that appearance? When it displays, when it doesn't, what the visibility range, or transparency. I can set transparency using a slider. I can actually type in those values in there. Whether or not I want to swipe that back and forth, you can have it has automatically swipe built in here. Symbology allows me to go and start setting my symbology right from this appearance component here. Same thing with labeling. This allows me to automatically start labeling my functions here, and whether or not I want to display, if it's COGO enabled, I can see whether I want to display my bearings and distances or just my distances on here. And it will automatically calculate those. So if I go and let's go and open up the attribute here, and I can say that I do have some files here. Let's go and zoom to this. All right, where are they? Not sure where these lines actually are. There they are. All right, and I can tell it. Again, I have this overall, and then I tell whether I want to go and display this distance value here, and do it this way. It's here, 1 to 2,000. I'm zoomed in way further than that. So there's my labels being displayed, bearing and distance, or I can turn that one off and just do my distance field and tell that to display whenever also. All right. So labeling on there. You also have a data tab, which allows you to go and do things like figure out what attribute fields are displayed, how to add attribute fields, delete attribute fields, figuring out what they're structured as, set up. So I can go here and look at my fields view for my line feature class and be able to define whether or not it's highlighted in my attribute field. All right. What the numeric value is on here. I can also go and tell it that, for example, I want 2 decimal places, show the thousands, and then these are feet. So let's go ahead and display my shape length as feet. When I save this and go back here and open up my attribute table, I will see, I had that turned off, didn't I? My shape length here. Let's turn that on. I can see that it actually has my value here, and it's got a suffix in there of feet. So it's a radically different way from ArcMap thinking about your data, think about how your data is going to be represented, how it's going to be stored on here. And again, anytime you move to any single layer, you've got the feature layer tab group that pops up, and it has, here's your appearance for that, here's the labeling for that, and here's your data structure for that, so that you can see what's going on. Everything from attribute rules, contingent values, spatial joins, relates, everything that's associated with that data and associated with that feature class is on there. All right, let me edit, clear off of this here. Be done with that. So interface. Let's look at structures. We've already talked about what ArcMap will handle and what ArcGIS Pro will handle. ArcGIS or ArcMap will go and handle shapefiles. It will handle file geodatabases. It will handle personal geodatabases. It will handle client-server implementations. And it's a little convoluted, but you can actually bring file services, feature services into ArcMap. But it's a little more, again, it's sort of kludgy in the way that it goes and brings them in. It does go and bring them in here. ArcGIS Pro is set up to go and handle shapefiles, file geodatabases, client-server geodatabases, and feature services built in there. It can handle all of those. There is something you do want to be aware of, and this is important when you're moving from ArcMap into ArcGIS Pro. That's annotation. Annotation, ArcMap annotation can be viewed inside of ArcGIS Pro, but it cannot be edited. And conversely, GIS Pro annotation can be viewed, no, it can't be viewed, sorry, thinking through this. And let's test this. So I have in here, under Topo, I have some test ArcGIS Pro annotation. And just sort of to show you, here's the standard feature classes for it. And these are sort of standard, but there's new attribute fields for the ArcGIS Pro annotation. But if I go to, this is ArcMap annotation, I go in here and try to read this ArcGIS Pro annotation, right? It will tell me this is incompatible with the data set. It can't open it. It was not forward compatible. You can't read ArcGIS Pro annotation from ArcMap, but I can go back here to ArcGIS Pro. I can read the ArcMap annotation in here. Turn this off. This is the ArcMap annotation here. I don't have anything stored here, but I can read it. If I go to edit, it will tell me that I cannot edit ArcMap annotation. It has to be upgraded. And this actually is one of those things that you should think about before you're thinking about migrating into ArcGIS Pro, is that because that annotation is not transferable between the two systems, if you have users that are wanting to stay on ArcMap, you will not be able to see and use any sort of the annotation that's built and created and edited in ArcGIS Pro. So just be aware, annotation is one of those areas where you have to be aware of it. You have to go and think through it before you do anything on here. Again, ArcGIS Pro does not handle personal geodatabases. So ArcMap annotation, personal geodatabases. Those are the two things that you want to think about and how you're going to manage those as you move forward. Any questions yet, by the way, Chris?
None in the chat.
Okay. Any questions, just put them in the chat window. This is going to moderate it and look at it and make sure what's going on. So inside of ArcMap, again, if I want to go and start creating a polygon, I can right click on that layer, go to edit. Can I not edit that? Am I editing already? I am editing. Go back here, go to parcels. Let's start editing here. It's telling me there's some projection issues here, but I can start editing, and I should Oh, look at this. I've got no tools available for me. I'm going to have to go in here and I'm going to have to go to edit features and organize a tool, go and create it. Let's do a new template for parcels here. That, see if I can start editing now. And it doesn't look like I have that capability. See if I go in here, start editing here. That's fine. I must have some elements in here that don't match the others, so it doesn't want to go and allow me to edit this. Remove this one here. Let's see if I can do this again. So let's go in and set this property for coordinate system of this. And I should be able to edit now without, no, obviously it was pulling information from the other. Show me this. Let's see if I can start editing. I can't start editing. It won't let me start editing yet. Let's go back over to Pro and see what the difference is. So in here, I have started editing, and I can now begin by going over to the Create Features tool. In this case, let's turn on a couple of these things, and I can go and create a parcel, a sample parcel here, using the tools. And you will note you no longer have the ArcMap 9. You don't have the task and the layer, the target that you're doing and the tool that you're doing. Instead, they're all part of the same way that we did it in ArcMap 10. Got a tool layer, a toolbar here, a construction tool, and it has lines, it has polygons, it has other elements in here for you. Things like if you want to go and edit elements in here, you can go and edit elements on here. You can accept these changes, or you can stop using the tool on here. There's a lot of options in here. It gives me the ability to define what construction tools I'm going to be using. Matter of fact, not only can I have access to all these construction tools, I can actually go and manage templates. This is in my sample parcels here. This is my feature template, and I can set the properties on here, going to tools, and I could say, I really won't be doing right angle. I won't be doing circles. I won't be doing rectangles or ellipses. I'll just be using these. And my default tool is going to be whatever is clicked on this radio button. And sure enough, my tools will automatically update for me. I can define what's my default tool, optional tools do I have to use. In addition, I also have over here a couple of other things. I can automatically set it so that I put attribution in here. It automatically will put all that attribution in every time I create a new element here. Let's go ahead and do that. Go ahead and create this. When I'm done with this and I look at my attributions, sure enough, it's automatically populating it. ArcMap, we had something similar to that, in which we had properties. No, it was edit, under edit options. You could tell it attributes and what you want the attributes to be, and you could tell it that you want it to automatically have an attribute required, but not necessarily go and set. So editing tools are enhanced inside of ArcGIS Pro. In addition to standard creation tools in here, there's other elements in here. For example, there's a whole set of tools for aligning components, reshaping components, and dividing components, and constructing components using COGO, validation, rule validation, and topology. So that probably it's good to talk about some of the design features of ArcGIS Pro and what they were trying to do with ArcGIS Pro. ArcGIS Pro, they were trying to set up a system so that you didn't have to know what type of a structure you were editing. Instead, software would understand that structure. And from that, it would choose the correct tool for you. So for example, if I go and select a polygon right now, then I go to my divide tool, we'll know that I have selected a polygon. It will allow me to go and divide that polygon according to a couple rules. I can divide it by proportional area or equal width. However, if I clear out of here, go back here, zoom to my lines, and this time I choose a line. I choose a line, the divide tool changes. Understands, oh, he doesn't have a polygon selected, he has a line selected. And then it knows I can choose this tool to go and divide my line by a single distance, by equal parts, percentages. If I'm doing it from distance, I can do it from the start or the end of the line. I can do a single distance. I can do multiples of a distance. So for example, this is 2,000 feet. I can say, 500 feet, do that. As you see, it's showing me what this is going to be. You can also do it varying distances. So maybe 100 feet and 300 feet, 500 feet, 600 feet, and it will show me what those distances are and what's left on them. ArcGIS Pro has actually gone and rethought the entire editing function. And how can I understand what the editor is trying to do? Take all the tools that previously were just scattered all over the place, put them all in one place, and allow them just select whatever they want to work on, and then tell me what they want to do with it. It's exactly the way the ArcGIS Pro Tools work. They allow you to go and select something and then tell it what you want to do, and the tool will respond to that. And that includes not just simple feature classes like lines and points and polygons, but also things like parcels and parcel fabric. Understands what you have selected, whether or not it's participating in a parcel fabric, or whether it's a simple feature class that you can go in and do that with. One more thing, I have more than one line selected. Let's go and unselect these. I can actually go and do this into equal parts and tell it to go and split multiple lines to equal parts. So I can do more than one thing at a time doing this. Right? So tools are definitely advanced. What we used to have in ArcMap. I'll show you one of my favorite tools, and anyone that's been at any of our workshops knows one of the things I'm going to show you now is this align features tool. It's sort of similar to what we experience often, is that we'll have multiple layers. The data on those multiple layers will not coincide with one another. What this align feature tool will do is it will allow us, and I don't even know what my scale is here. I'll find out here in a minute. It allows me to go and draw a line and tell it to go and look at everything inside the buffer, that tolerance that I've got, evaluate every single vertex to replace all the geometries with this new geometry that I just drew. Alignment path, tell it to put it in there. Then this thing down here says, you don't have to select it. If you can see it, if it's editable, we'll go and align every one of these so that it matches the path that you just drew. When I go and click on this, it automatically will go and update the geometries of the points, the lines, the polygons, match what I had before through all the layers that I have turned on at the moment. So for example, just to go and do this one more time, right, you can see there's a lot of different lines there. Some of them are matching, some of them are not matching. And I can tell it to just put them all together and update every one of those geometries with new geometry that I just put in there, including like curves. If I have a series of curves in here, I can do the same thing. Have it go and update them all. I actually have some features here that it won't. There's actually polygon built in there. So, and I think the bottom line on here is just the tools are set up so that they can empower the editor to go and edit much more efficiently than what we used to do in ArcMap. ArcMap, we used to have to go and select each one of these features, make the change on it, then go to the next layer, select that layer, make the change on it. So there was a lot of selections going on. The only thing I want to talk about on this is how you actually set up and configure application to go and work for you. Inside of ArcMap were specific settings. If I go in here to properties, options on here that I could go and set up. If I would go to editing options, it would give me specific options on what I could do, when I could do it, how I could do it. And they, again, because of the way in which it was developed, they were scattered all over. In addition to these standard settings, which are available inside the application, also was an advanced set of settings. There's this right here. There's a thing called ArcMap Advanced Setting Utilities. It was located on your local drive under Program Files, x86, ArcGIS, Desktop, whatever version you were running under Utilities. And it was a separate file that actually would get in and it would edit your registry keys. What this is, it's actually going to edit registry keys for me for settings that I could tell it where, for example, my styles were stored, what data frames, miscellaneous settings in here, the editor strings are going to work, what advanced editing, if I had Kogo on here, what happens when I make a change to it, does it get changed or not? This topology, does it show my dirty areas or not? Really intense settings that were all stored in the registry that the normal user wouldn't necessarily get to see. It turns out that inside of ArcGIS Pro, settings are stored over on options here so that they are readily available to everybody. Going through this, so you can set this up to work exactly as you want it to work. For example, to your project, what's it called? Where's it stored? About a home folder? What about a default geodatabase? What about a default toolbar? You can set them right here. What about your units? It's something that always was a challenge in ArcMap, is to set your units for Kogo values. You can set not just your units, but you can also set your default for that. Including if I wanted to go and add a unit, maybe there's something that's not here. As a surveyor, I often use chains. I could just as easily just go in and say, here's a chain. That now becomes available to me for use. Angular measurements, I could set my default angular measurement is, in this case, degrees, minutes, and seconds. What areas? I can tell it I always want to use acres on here. Locations, directions, I can tell it to set it to quadrant bearings. So I can set up sort of all my settings there. In addition, I have a new component in here in which I can tell it to go and every 15 minutes store a backup copy of my project file. Nothing worse than setting up a complete map document in ArcMap and then having it crash before you actually save that map document. It will allow you to automatically save your project file as a backup that you can recover the next time you come in. If it's got a backup that's newer than the one that's been saved, it will allow you to go in and add that. In addition, now have the ability in ArcGIS Pro to change the way the application looks so that we can have a light theme or a dark theme. Dark theme, as soon as I go out of ArcMap, out of ArcGIS Pro, I'm going to do now, I'm going to save this, save my settings of ArcGIS Pro, go back into ArcGIS Pro. It now has theme on it. So again, it depends upon what it shows. In here to options and change that back to location theme of light. And this out and go in again. One more option I want to go and show you before we end this workshop. Other option that we have is under the it's going to this too. Enable and disable editing from the Edit tab. That's start editing and stop editing. And automatically save edits. ArcGIS Pro now. Evaluate whether that's something you want to do or not, but it's something that was asked for ArcMap for a long time, and we finally have it. Want to make sure that that's exactly what you're looking for. Chris, I don't see any other questions, or I don't see any questions in there. So obviously I talked here. Everybody kind of knew what I was doing. If there are no more questions, I think I'm going to stop here. And say, I hope that you enjoyed this, and give us more ideas as far as what you want to go and show you inside. Thanks for attending, and we hope you enjoyed this workshop. If you have questions, would like some more details about anything we discussed during this workshop, or if you or anyone at your organization would like information about training, support, or ways in which we can help you with your GIS needs, please contact me at frank@pandaconsulting.com or call me at 561-691-3277, and we can discuss how we can help you with your needs.